Very warm welcome to everybody. This is our 108th happy hour, and as Sally mentioned, the last of our present series. And you won't be surprised, we're already thinking about what the next series will be, our April and summer series. And before that, we're very much hoping to run a couple of in-person events as well. More about that probably in the new year. This afternoon, we're very much looking at, said, do-it-yourself shared ownership, but actually this is a broad spectrum of different types of shared ownership, and we're joined by three fabulous speakers. For those of you who knew that we were going to run this, and we're looking forward also to hearing from Wendy from Oxfordshire and her work at Oxford Brookes University. I'm afraid due to illness, she's not unable to join us on screen. However, we look forward to building on the contacts we've had with Wendy and her research, so we can share with you another occasion. But this afternoon, we're joined by Owen Jarvis, who's the Chief Exec of the UK Cohousing Network, Dawn Carr, the Director of Operations at West Midlands Legacy, and you'll hear a lot more about the partnerships they're doing in the Midlands, in particular with Housing 21, and Claire O'Connell, the Project Architect at WeCanMake down in Bristol, and some of the fantastic work on community-led developments and homes that's happening across there in that particular area. Before I hand over to Owen, just a quick note that for those of you who are familiar with the recent Older Persons Housing Task Force that came out, that particular task force had the spotlight really on different types of housing for older people, and particularly around specialised housing. But we also realised that actually we need to look at a broader range of choices. So there are around 8 references to co-housing, or 20+ references to different community-led housing, recognising that it's a really vital and valuable resource, and we need to look at how we grow that. And the idea today is very much about how we can build on some of that thinking that was set out in the task force, as well as engage with Owen, Dawn and Claire about what's happening both nationally and locally to help stimulate that supply. So without further ado, I'm going to pass on to Owen. Owen, thanks very much for joining us. And look forward to hearing your fabulous presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Right, let's get this. Okay, just checking with Sally, all is well.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. Absolutely delighted to be talking about co-housing. So Jeremy set us the challenge, if you like, is the future DIY co-housing? Can we do it for ourselves? So I guess the spoiler alert, you'll be unsurprised to know that the answer is yes, but with help as well. I'm just going to talk a little bit about that as well. So it's yes, no, and a little bit more to tell you about exactly what the answer to that means. So I'm going to cover some of the challenges co-housing addresses, a little bit on what is co-housing for those of you who are fresh to it, what are the benefits of co-housing, and as Jeremy was indicating there, a bit about the national picture, what's happening, what are the prospects for co-housing, and then what you can do next if you want to go ahead and find out more. In fact, I've put that as the next slide. So after today, there are 3 things you can do that we'd suggest. The first one is if you're thinking about co-housing and might want to become a resident in co-housing, we have a co-housing essentials course in March. Is it for me? And there's an expression of interest link there. You can, of course, become a member of UK Cohousing Network. For individuals, it starts as low as £6.60 a month, and you could also join free of charge our national waiting list. So when opportunities come up for new co-housing schemes or existing ones, you'll be top of the list, and we'll know about it very shortly. So this is Charles Durrett, one of the leading co-housing thinkers from America. Spent a lot of time in Denmark, where co-housing originated. And for Charles, the key question is housing, if it doesn't work socially, what is the point? And I suppose that is a question all of us can think about with our neighbourhoods. Are they working socially for us at the moment? You know, what's a high functioning neighbourhood? Strong sense of belonging, identity, accountability. Do we know the names of our neighbours? Do we care about each other? And are we there in times of need? So how do we get involved in designing and managing great places to live, which was my sort of takeaway from Jeremy's challenge? There are a number of challenges that co-housing seeks to address, and I just wanted to touch on a few of them. One of the things co-housing can do is tackle loneliness, and there is research from Age UK. Many people at HousingLIN will be very familiar with this research showing that 1.4 million older people in the UK are often lonely. Half of adults in the report were found to be so as well. Co-housing seeks to provide more green spaces and access to nature connection. 1 in 8 households have no access to a private or a shared garden. And co-housing seeks to develop high quality housing and shared facilities. And there was a audit that was carried out by Place Alliance a couple of years ago on 142 brand new housing developments across England, and 3/4, 75%, were seen to be mediocre or poor, which is actually quite a shocking statistic. So co-housing, what is it and how does it work? What is co-housing? A couple of images here from Marmalade Lane. Co-housing is a sociable community where people know their neighbours and collaborate to live more sustainably. And importantly, co-housing is an intentional community. That means people choose to live there and want to participate in their neighbourhood. Typically, it's of 20 to 40 homes, shared and communal spaces. It's designed specifically for social interaction by and with its residents. And residents are involved in the management and ownership of the neighbourhood. And co-housing schemes are good citizens in their local areas. These are not gated communities. And the model is flexible. So you may find many different types or themes of co-housing, and we've listed a few of those at the bottom. So this is an illustration we sometimes use, and it captures many of the aspects of co-housing that you might find. And you can see the mix of private homes, sustainable design, shared gardens, shared facilities, carpools, and a common house. And it's interesting, one person summed up co-housing to me as a way of scaling up their lives, because they were able to get so much more in a co-housing neighbourhood than they would be able to get just by living in their own home. And this is an image from above Marmalade Lane in Cambridge, and on the right is Marmalade Lane, and on the left you can see a conventional development. And you can see the stark contrast between the two, with cars and tarmac dominating on the left, and green spaces and terraced homes where children can play in the streets easily on the right. So co-housing, do it yourself or do it ourselves options. There are 3 main routes to co-housing as we see it at the moment. The first one I'd probably call self-led developments. And Lancaster co-housing is a multi-generational scheme. It's home ownership and is focused on high sustainability performance. And the key thing here was that the founders and residents of Lancaster co-housing they hired an architect, they hired a builder, they oversaw the whole process themselves from start to end. And it's an extraordinary development if you are in that part of the world. The second model would be developer-led or enabled. Marmalade Lane in Cambridge is a celebrated award-winning version. Multi-generational as well, home ownership. And in this case, the developer led the development, accessed the site, recruited architect, but working with the residents. The residents were very much involved in the design, and at the end of the process, once it was developed, have taken on the ownership of the co-housing scheme. And the third example here is New Ground in Barnet. Many of you may know as Ouch as well. And here it's clearly led by some very pioneering women who have developed a mixed scheme, social rental and home ownership for older women. But it was enabled by Hanover Housing Association led the development, and Housing for Women is a housing association that supports the management of the social rental units now. So just a cautionary note, a bit of a, if you like, a grumpy point here from Charles Durrett, but it is quite important maybe to point out that whilst we do talk about DIY or do it ourselves, it is important to research and really become familiar with co-housing and what's involved in it. It is a change of lifestyle from living on your own, living in your own home, to being part of a neighbourhood. And it does take some consideration and care. And this is a slight sort of warning, if you like, from Charles to maybe not underplay the importance of good advice and support. So what are the benefits? We have some excellent research in the sector, and we're really hoping to hear from Wendy to add to the collection of really good research in co-housing. Co-housing is good for healthy aging. The University of Bristol have produced a report, and there's a link to it here. Co-housing reduces loneliness, and the London School of Economics has produced research looking at community-led housing and co-housing in particular. And co-housing is green. It's got lower carbon footprint than mainstream housing, and the University of Westminster, through Penny Clark, have completed a really detailed case study and analysis, which is worth looking at. So Jeremy was talking earlier about the task force, and there are a number of, if you like, national trends which give us good hope for the future and the prospects for co-housing. As many of us know, the government has really ambitious plans, 1.5 million homes. But we found it reassuring to see that the housing minister has really placed an emphasis on quality and diversifying house building supply, which is good news. There was a report a couple of years ago from Richard Bacon MP looking at the levels of custom and self-build, and in Europe it's fairly high. It's in some countries over 50% of new homes are delivered through custom build, but it's only 7% in the UK. So there's huge potential to do more. And the good news is that this year, Homes England allocated 2 sites in Northstowe, a new town development outside Cambridge, for co-housing, including the first Buddhist co-housing scheme in the UK. And that's a really good sign, because that provides a precedent for further co-housing and custom build housing in the future. The other 2 points I'd probably add to that. Equity held by over 50s, and I'm absolutely sure this has been covered by HousingLIN, but it is worth thinking in terms of doing it ourselves. Those over 50 hold over 2 trillion of housing equity, which, as in the cases with whether it's Marmalade Lane or whether it's looking at Newground or Lancaster, using personal equity is a really good way of financing new co-housing schemes. And we've been part of a community-led housing long-term strategy with our partners, and the government currently have our long-term strategy, which includes proposals to bring new finance specifically for community-led housing, to back developers who are specifically focused on supporting community-led housing and co-housing, and to ensure that community-led housing is commissioned on larger sites and new towns in particular. So this was the task force that Jeremy has been involved with, and we were, as noted, delighted to hear so many references. The chair of the task force visited Newground, and you can see that one of the key recommendations is to see more community-led housing, which we're very pleased with. And the diagram on the front cover of the report also has co-housing identified as a collection of possibilities for the future. there are lots of really good references, and as you can see here, age-friendly and inclusive co-housing developments are identified as having huge potential to offer mutual support and companionship. So we would like to see many more. And probably just briefly, it's worth mentioning the NPPF has just recently been published, and there is a good definition for community-led development, which is and community-led exception sites. And these are important because local authorities, master planners, developers will be keeping this in mind when they're getting guidance for new developments. So it's really important that those are there. And so finally, really, are there any opportunities in co-housing presently for some of you who might be interested? And I've picked three. There's Angel Yard in Norwich, which has got planning permission and is moving forward. They're still looking for residents, as far as I know. North Stowe, very much in the early stages, but if you would like to be part of very early stages onwards of a co-housing scheme, which can be very exciting, there's an opportunity there. And Bridge Farm in Somerset is the redevelopment of an existing farm. And again, are also looking for new residents. If you do move forward, please mention our name because we get a donation if you move in. So that really does help us with our work. And as a final slide, just a reminder that there are these three actions you can take if you want to move forward today, including our course in March, membership, and joining the national waiting list. Thank you very much.
Oh, and thank you. Really informative. And I know a lot of people have found that very useful, and both the references to things coming up and also resources that you've talked about. So again, I hope there'll be some questions about that and drilling down. And I know personally, I'm involved in a local co-housing project that I'm involved in, which locally. So hopefully that will be another one you can add to your list in due course. We're also going to think a bit more about those strategic partnerships that you mentioned, and we're going to ask Dawn to sort of share her work around the work with Housing 21. So Dawn, it was lovely to meet you back at Housing 21's conference earlier this year, and thanks very much for taking the time this afternoon to join us. So Dawn, over to you.
And thanks for inviting me. If you could just go to the next slide. So I'm Dawn Carr. I'm part of an organisation called Legacy West Midlands, which is based in Birmingham, in the Handsworth area, which is very, very deprived. And as we've been established as an organisation since 2010, essentially to showcase the heritage of post-war migrant communities. But since then, we've grown immensely, and we now do more than just heritage. It's arts and well-being and community cohesion. And it's a community cohesion part of our work that led us to Housing 21, who commissioned us to be the locally trusted organisation to help them coordinate the implementation of the Housing 21 co-housing schemes across Birmingham. Next slide. So I think Owen has gone through what co-housing is and the difference it makes on the ground. But what he hasn't said is that co-housing, although it's not new, is probably a privilege that has only been accessible to maybe academic, affluent, middle-class communities. And more nowadays, it's being seen as a model that could be used for urban communities that have complex needs or complex health inequalities. And in particular, in the Birmingham area, we find that in the Lozells area where we're working, that there are three types of people of old age. You have minority communities who predominantly rent their accommodation and live in really poorly managed rented accommodation, i.e. lots of damp, repairs that haven't been taken place, and just really poor conditions, as well as no access to open spaces. And then you have a second type that probably owns their own house, but because of the lack of generational wealth, they're unable to maintain those houses, and they also need urgent repairs that they can't afford to to do, especially with the rising cost of living. And then the third type could be the affluent elderly person who owns their own home and probably even has a family locally or lives with their family. However, they still experience great loneliness and are often seen as a burden to their family if they have increasing health inequalities as well. So there are three types, and this type of mutual support that co-housing brings can tackle all of those three types of communities that we come across. So if you go to the next slide. So what we've done is supported Housing 21 in just connecting with communities and helping with the consultation around the schemes that they've been developing. And Owen said it's really important that you do have an intentional community who actually understand what co-housing is, what it's about, and really want to change their way of thinking, their lifestyle, and embrace this type of approach. So what we did is we did a huge consultation where we spoke to lots of people who were over 55. That was a brief at the time. And we asked them, what would an intentional community look like to you? What would help with your own needs and help with the support and engagement that you need with the local community and your local networks? And there was a whole menu of things that were discussed, such as having access to garden spaces so they could grow vegetables, have movie nights, have that opportunity to sit and have meals together. And all of this wish list was given to the architects who were involved, called Triangle Architects, and they came up with the design according to their needs. So if you go to the next slide. So once we had the design, we went out to consultation again, a wider consultation. I have to say that when we first started this, it was during the pandemic. So it was very difficult to engage at first because we couldn't get access to communities. But by the time we got to this stage where we was going out to consultation, the pandemic had eased. So we was finally able to actually see people face to face. And you can see some lovely photographs where, people were able to really touch the designs, either in a 2D or 3D fashion. And that was really, really exciting for the local community. So what I want to do is I'm going to show you a short video, because I could sit here and tell you the story, but I want to let the residents tell the story for you. So if we could just play the video.
Hi, I'm Dawn Carr and I'm the Director of Operations at Legacy West Midlands, based here in Handsworth and Lozells area of Birmingham, which is one of the most deprived areas in the UK, but rich in diversity. I'm working in partnership with Housing 21 to design and develop an exciting new build housing project for people over 60 called Rapali Court, bringing 25 new affordable low energy homes to the area.
My name's Ash Round. I am the Delivery Development Manager for Housing 21. Events like this today obviously help push things along really nicely. Generally it's going really well, the residents are engaging well, and construction is now starting to come out of the ground, which makes for a more tangible product for the resident group to see. So the residents have been really involved in influencing the design and the orientation of the building and what we have included or not included. The architects have then been away and done all of their work alongside the other consultants. The contractor have been in. They've coordinated all that further design work along with a lot of our input, a lot of Legacy's help with the residents, and we've managed to come up with a really good product that's going to be a really high quality place for people to live.
Rapali Court is based on a model of intentional living called co-housing. Co-housing is a community-led housing approach where local people design and develop a site that not only meets their individual needs, but also provides a sense of community with shared facilities to meet and socialise, such as a common house, shared gardens, laundry, or even car sharing. This type of mutual support brings communities together from all backgrounds and helps our elders to age better and reduce isolation and loneliness.
Hi, my name's Callum. I work for Legacy West Midlands. I've been working with part of this project now since 2022. It's just amazing to see what progression that has happened in the space of 2 years so far. And one of the most amazing things I've seen, the excitement on the residents' faces, especially with what they've just witnessed today and what they've seen themselves.
The Rapali Court community are a group of like-minded people that have been involved in the design and decision-making of the whole project, including the garden spaces and its interior design.
Hi, I'm Rick James. I am from Block Interiors, and we were kindly invited to do the design for Housing 21 for this fantastic project. We're doing all the design work, interiors for it. I think the project's going absolutely fantastic. It's great speaking to the residents, getting their input, which often you don't have that kind of opportunity to work with the residents, and it's been really good.
My name's Raymond Copeland. I'm from Handsworth, Birmingham, North Birmingham all my life. A member of the Housing 21 committee. What I would like to say to the persons involved in this project is how impressed I am with their professionalism, the design, the architects and everybody involved. It's outstanding. I'm really impressed. I just can't wait until I move in.
The project aims to bring a new, attractive gateway to Lozells, introducing new green spaces and a safe environment.
My name's Harry Randawa. I'm a director at Triangle Architects. We were appointed about 5 years ago by Housing 21 to deliver the first co-housing scheme in a area with a high ethnically diverse community. We've grown to know the residents that will be moving in, and it's been an experience for us all. We've tried to give them the best design we can, equally trying to give them something that they'll be proud to call a home. We should be complete by the spring of 2026, and I hope that the residents will be very happy in the new homes and that they will have many events at the common house and the gardens, which they were very eager to have, and proud to bring the wider community in and grow Rapali Court as a co-housing scheme for the residents and for the wider community.
If you'd like to get involved or want more information, contact info@legacy-wm.org.
Thank you. So I hope that tells the story, but just in case you wanted to know where we are with the project, I think it's fair to say that the criteria for Rapali Court that Housing 21 have put in is that all the units are available for rent only. So that kind of it kind of decides what type of people are involved. So these people may never have been involved in decision making. So the hardest part over the past 5 years is capacity building them to make decisions and understand how they want to run their scheme. So the first part was actually naming the scheme, which was, if you want to know why it's called Rapali Court, Rapali is a Bengali word for silver. And obviously the word silver is associated with people over 60. And so we thought that was a really appropriate name. Not only that, the location where the scheme is by what's called the Jewellery Quarter in the Birmingham area. And the Chain Walk where it's located had lots of silver makers that lived on that particular street. So we thought that was an appropriate name. Also, what they've been doing is deciding what type of operating model they want. So within Housing 21, they have many different operating models. And again, because they didn't feel comfortable in being completely resident-led, they have opted for to appoint a managing agent when they actually move into the scheme. And this may change. It's like a sliding scale. It can change, as when they feel that they're confident enough to take on more responsibility and more decision making. The other thing that they've looked at is various things. We've talked about the interior design and the look and feel of the plot in terms of the options, whether they have an open kitchen or a closed kitchen. But one of the most important things that they've been working on is the terms of the tenancy. So to give an example, the guidelines from Housing 21 was for over 55s. However, in the terms of tenancy that they put together, it's moved to over 60, because in an urban diverse community, a 55-year-old is very much different from a 60-year-old. Most 55-year-olds don't have that the opportunity to retire early and are still working, and that can cause many complications in a co-housing scheme like this, in terms of access and, you know, just managing people's expectations of shared facilities and shared responsibilities. And even though they don't have a tangible building yet, over the past 5 years, they've been working on activities together that they hope to deliver in their scheme. So they regularly organise a Christmas party. They have a regular coffee morning every Wednesday, which will also doubles up as their regular committee meetings. But the coffee morning is open to everybody. They've done day trips, they've gone to visit other co-housing schemes as well, and they regularly do lots of wellbeing workshops and focus on health literacy as well. So just to finally go to, if you go to the next slide, please. So thank you. I supported Owen with this resource, which he showed in his slide, and it's just based on a model of co-housing in urban spaces. And I've got these 4 C's which we use locally that I would give to anybody if they wanted to, you know, follow what we did. So I think the first one is, the most important thing is cultural competency. There is a reason why Housing 21 commissioned Legacy West Midlands to do that. And I'm sure when you saw the photograph in my first slide, you can see we're a very diverse team. We understand the local community. We have a diverse range of languages within our team. And, you know, we feel we are locally trusted, so that we can do this and get the confidence of the local community. Obviously, consultation, you've seen, is really important at every step of the way. Every decision that needs to be taken, we consult with the community and wider. But the most important thing I said is building a co-housing community. Everybody has to be signed up to the co-housing ethos and want to live as an intentional community and share spaces, you know, have meals together, and work to have that consensus decision making within their scheme. And capacity building, you know, as I said, we have to realise that people come from different levels, different backgrounds, different experiences, and the most important thing is bringing everybody to that level playing field and empowering them so they can make decisions. So thank you.
Sorry about that. So I was just struggling to get back onto audio. With the problems I've had all week with my audio, I'm glad you can still hear me and I can hear you as well. But that was really excellent, and it was lovely to see the breadth of the representation as well. And what I loved about it was not just about co-housing, it's about co-production and co-design. So really those additional sort of C's in terms of really driving that cultural competency that you referred to. Well, we're going to move to another C, and that's Claire O'Connell. And we're going to take a different look. And some of the work that Claire's doing in Bristol takes much more of a community-led approach in neighbourhoods. And so, Claire, really looking forward to hearing your presentation and adding a different dimension to the conversation we're already having today.
Great, thank you. I will just share my screen.
Yes, and apologies if I've blocked off and gone and disappeared. My dog seems to want to say hello, but I'm going to prevent him jumping up and saying hello to you all this afternoon. Anyway, over to you.
That's okay if your dog jumps up. Happily. Yeah, thanks for inviting me to speak. As Jeremy's already said, this part of the discussion isn't really so much about co-housing, but more about our kind of approach to community-led housing. So yeah, I'm from WeCanMake in Bristol. We are a community land trust and we build affordable homes at point of need. We're very place-based. Our process is very much about engaging as many local people as possible. And it's really about how homes, well, it's more about how we need to be building homes, not just units. And that's really what kind of drives us here at WeCanMake. So WeCanMake was kind of born out of a response to the housing crisis and this realization and accepting that we're obviously in this huge demand to build houses, but of all those houses being built, only 4% are built that are truly affordable at social rent. And even less than that, only 2% meet the highest environmental standards. So taking that as our kind of backstop, was like, we need to do better ultimately. So we're looking at how we can kind of build using local people, working with those existing communities to do better than what's being done by the volume house builders who are making supernormal profits. So yeah, we're based in northwestern Bristol, which is a really low density neighbourhood. It was built under garden city principles. So all these houses tend to have huge back gardens, which are lovely, but a lot of them are kind of underused. And there's also lots of kind of issues with overcrowding and undercrowding in these homes. So it's not making the best use of the space. So it's only 25 dwellings per hectare in this area, and the recommended kind of optimum for new developments is more like 50 to 100. So one of the kind of recommendations from the council was to demolish and densify, which we feel is not the right solution here. So ours is more about how can we work with what's here and make it work harder, make it work better, and use that kind of local know-how of local people. So we work with something we called urban acupuncture. So we find infill sites all throughout our neighbourhood that can be used to create homes exactly where they're needed. So we've built 2 homes so far, and these are on microsites, which are found kind of using kind of big underused back gardens or kind of infill sites that are facing the street. And then we also identify kind of larger plots, which would be old garage sites, like this image here on the bottom right. So there are kind of 2 main typologies at the moment. So as I said, we've built 2 homes so far. This is the home of Tony and Amancia, who you can see up in this picture at the top. Move this out of the way. And Tony and Amancia were living with Tony's parents in this host home. And they were basically in a situation of kind of major overcrowding. They didn't have enough space to thrive, and kind of an opportunity was identified really in that they had this really big back garden, which wasn't really being used. So they approached WeCanMake about kind of us building them a home. And it's a very unique model in that this house is council owned, and so it's the plot obviously, but through the WeCanMake model, the council will transfer this parcel of land into the land trust, and it'll be owned by the community, and it's affordable in perpetuity ultimately. So Tony and Amancia were involved from the beginning. They have designed their own home. Tony helped to build it, and was very much, it's kind of given her a new sense of like independence. So she lives there. She's still got that network of care with her parents who help to look after her little girl. And similarly, we've got situations of overcrowding on other microsites where like an elderly grandparent might want to move into the kind of rear garden home, and they still need their family nearby to help with the kind of looking after them really. So it kind of, some of that does draw on some of the principles of co-housing and those networks of care that can be created. What's going on? We use a system called block build, which is basically, it's a discrete modern method of construction, and we have chosen it because it helps to unlock these quite tricky to activate sites in the rear gardens, but it's also really great because it means it's very accessible for people because it uses a machine to cut the blocks, and then they can be filled by like anybody really. So Tony, who's in this image here, she helped to build a whole wall of her home, and so it's very much, you can say she helped to build it and was part of that process. So we have a microfactory in Norwest as well, where we build all of our homes, and kind of so we can bring people into that whole process, and it's kind of helping to upskill local people as well, rather than that kind of the construction just washing through a place. It's like the jobs are all remaining local. So kind of going on from that, with the first 2 homes that were built, we've also generated a lot of social value in that because of how we choose to build. So because we have that local microfactory and we work with as many kind of local contractors as possible, it's mean we've ultimately generated more social value per home than it actually costs to build them. It's quite a hard thing to kind of, it's not very tangible, but it's really kind of an amazing outcome. And it's just meaning that that wealth is kind of staying within the community as well, rather than just washing through it. To kind of continue our journey with social value, we've also been exploring a lot about how we can make our homes more sustainable. So we We've recently got some funding from the Forestry Commission and done a report on homegrown homes. So we've explored basically how we can build our homes using all the materials found within 100 miles, and that's been a kind of one of our forces to make them as to reduce the kind of carbon as much as possible. So having now built our first 2 homes, those first 2 microsites, we're looking at how we can scale up and unlock more sites across the city. And we were also very, through the trust we've kind of built with the council for those smaller sites, we have one kind of preferred bidder status for 3 larger sites across the city, which can be seen here. So they are kind of garage sites all across South Bristol. And Bristol Council is quite innovative in that they did this community-led land disposal, where they ultimately have given these sites to community groups to develop to provide affordable housing where it's needed. So we are currently developing one site at Rodford's Mead, which is this site here, and have been doing some really great kind of co-design and community engagement on that site. So one of the first things we did was put some scaffolding up, which kind of goes up to 3 stories, and just to start conversations with local people about kind of what they would feel comfortable being there. Like, is 2 stories going to be enough, or could it be more? And like this, I think, had caused alarm bells at first. People thought construction had started, but it was really just that great way in to get people to actually come in and have those conversations about what they want. And then through all of this kind of engagement, so we were given the sites on the basis we would provide housing, but ultimately this area has been so underserved and all of the resources have been kind of stripped out that they need more than just housing. And that's kind of been the resounding thing from all of our engagement is housing's not enough. They need community space. They need place to come together and to gather. So that's what we've kind of been doing over the summer. We've been activating the site and making it this place where people can come and get to know their neighbours. And the houses have been designed on that street, so they're all kind of back to front, and they've got big kind of fences at the back, and you can't really see. There's no moments of those kind of spontaneous kind of social interaction with neighbours. So we've been using this site to see actually how can that activate those relationships really. One of the things to do at WeCanMake is we always try to introduce a making activity. So we had local potters on the site who have got clay from within Bristol, and each of the residents came along and made a little tile, which the vision is that could potentially go into the community space at a later date. And it's kind of starting to build that kind of sense of ownership. And it was before us kind of taking over the site, it's been a problem for fly tipping and kind of bonfires and everything. So we've really been having to like build the trust of that community. And I think one of the things, we'd shown some images of what could be built there, and a group of kind of young lads had come across and they were like, oh, no one's going to build anything that nice here. And they just kind of feel like no one's going to do it for them. So it's been really kind of rewarding to be part of that process and bring them into the conversation, and them kind of opening up about having skills about how to repair bikes, and that they'd like to share those with local people. So yeah, we've kind of come to a point in the design where ultimately we kind of put options to people about it being 2, 3 or 4 stories, and everyone was like, 2 stories isn't enough. We need that community space. So we're looking at having kind of basically the whole ground floor given over to kind of community activity. So a flexible space that can have can cater to all different needs really. And the management of that space will be kind of dictated by the local people and how they want it to function. And then having these flats above, which could also help. There's a lot of overcrowding in the area. So lots of young mums who are living with their parents still are really keen to like register interest to live in this development. And then as well as that, kind of the more broad kind of community engagement we've done on site, we've also recruited a group of kind of 10 local residents who we've done a deep co-design process with to kind of really get into like the nitty-gritty. So talking to them about like what materials could be used on the site, how does the existing environment make them feel, and raising their awareness of more kind of biomaterials and what else is possible really, how it can be more playful and really activate the street. And then also kind of raising these conversations about like living together and how does that work as a community? How does that space get managed? Really kind of starting to interrogate that, and them starting to come up with solutions as well, and realizing that it's not necessarily just going to be plain sailing, and about people needing to all kind of invest in this bigger picture for that to really work. This is just a little bit more about kind of how we're working with that with the floor plans, and we're basically currently in the process of designing a system so that it can be used on this site and other sites in the future, but trying to create as much flexibility in that system as possible so it can meet a variety of different housing needs. So it could be kind of, if there's loads of 3-beds needed in the area, it could cater for that, but alternatively, it could be a mix of 3s, 2s and 1-beds. And yeah, so a bit of a whistle-stop tour of WeCanMake.
Well, Claire, that was really brilliant, and sort of wraps up the presentations and giving sort of both the sort of like from Owen's national oversight and how that drills down into localities, and then how you and Dawn have shaped some of that, both in terms of looking at particular projects and both in terms of purpose-built accommodation, but also how you're looking at retrofitting and looking at how to sort of look at infill and developments, very much community-led. So I think a really rich mix. And we just posted a couple of other examples from around the country. I'm particularly like this concept of peoplehood that's been developed by Black Housing in Scotland, and I know we've got some colleagues from Scotland who are guests on the as attendees today as well. And it's such a rich mix, as Owen sort of described, in terms of things that are developing. We've got about sort of 10 minutes or so for questions and debate, and I think a few questions have already been posted in the Q&A box, and I'll go through those. But also, if you've been prompted by Claire, Owen and Dawn about anything and want to ask some particular questions, we've still got time to take a few more. The first question, in no particular order, is from a dear friend of the HousingLIN, Jim. Nice to hear from you. And he says, thanks, Dawn. I think Rapali Court will be a pretty groundbreaking scheme, even with the field of collaborative housing. Really excited to see it developing. The question is, you note that the model is a TMO, a tenant management organisation. Can you expand on that slightly? For example, what levels are the key decisions, such as financial decisions, made by tenant when by Housing 21's management? And I think you also touched on sort of the agency management as well, arrangement. So are you able to come back on that and sort of answer Jim's particular question?
Yeah, I mean, it's still in its infancy stage. The tenants haven't moved in yet, and we're constantly going through the process of decision making around the tenancy agreement and how decisions will be made. And the group are growing stronger and stronger year on year, year on. So the simple answer is, at the stage when we started looking at the tenancy agreement, they didn't want to take on the responsibility of what it is to manage a site, you know, such as fire regulations, security, and things like that. And you know, they felt that they, you know, wanted to adopt a model, what Housing 21 called a Housing 21 light model, which is like a tenant, a TMO, is very different, and I'm sure Steph can explain the different types of models that are available. However, you never know. They're due to move in 2026, and they may move on that scale to, you know, being more resident led as they grow in confidence and in capacity. So that's really the simple answer at this moment. No decisions have actually been made as to whether there will be a TMO, whether they'll appoint a managing agency, or whether they'll be completely resident led.
Well, thanks for that. I think there's another question for you, Dawn, while we're at it, slightly further down from Sahar. Were there any particular barriers, struggles you faced during the planning or establishment of Rapali in time of capacities of community members, funding local community support, resistance, engaging with prospective tenant residents, and perhaps even politically with local councillors and the like?
Well, we would need a whole other program to talk about this, but just to summarize it, it hasn't been as hard as I thought it was. The hardest thing was managing it during a pandemic, and obviously the aftermath of the pandemic and all that it brought with it. You know, Brexit, the cost of living, cost of materials, where we had to make various changes to the original design just based on costs. And then the other thing was I feel that it's brought the communities together. So when you saw in the video, you've got communities from varying different backgrounds, some of which don't speak English very well. And through being with each other, you know, making decisions, they've actually learned to speak English better and learn to practice their English, and are very, very vocal in making in making their decisions and making sure that their needs are heard. So that has been really the most surprising thing for me. I'm just really surprised at how they've grown as a group. They're really looking forward to the actual ethos of co-housing, and even though maybe they weren't the traditional intentional community from the offset, they are definitely an intentional community now.
Right. I'll throw that open. Other things and blockages and system issues, Owen, Claire, that you've come across and how you've overcome those. Either of you have a thought?
Well, I suppose the biggest challenge is is always getting access to sites and getting suitably priced finance, which is why it's great that Housing 21 and others are coming into the sector, because they have that firepower, they have the ability to finance these schemes and have the expertise. So that's been the big challenge. So for a lot of co-housing groups, they're fairly small scale, so when they access finance, it's going to be priced quite above the rates that councils and housing associations and large developers can get. But that's part of our ask to the government, to actually level that playing field. Gave a few examples there where we need to get better priced finance that makes it easier not only to find a site, but also do all the work up to planning permission that you need to do, and often that's the riskiest bit. But I think the government's aware of these challenges, and if we're going to meet the target of 1.5 million homes, I think they're quite keen to sort of take action on that. So fingers crossed. We're hoping the government's going to include community-led housing's long-term strategy as part of their housing strategy, and make it a lot easier for other groups.
Brilliant. And Claire, any thoughts about those?
Yeah, I would echo that finance.
Sailing, I'm sure.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I'd echo finance is definitely one of the bigger kind of hurdles, and securing good finance is something we're really looking into at the moment. And then for us, another of the big challenges is getting through the planning system, particularly for those back garden sites, because there's a lot of hesitation. And I think there's a lot of, it's kind of building those relationships in councils is really critical to getting things through, really.
Well, look, I know from the chat you will see a lot of people really thanking you and Claire, particularly around some of your stuff, as well as others in terms of what's happening in Birmingham and nationally. And I think you've answered the question that Stephanie has already posted around the mutual home ownership scheme model. Do you just want to sort of touch on that a little bit, what that means, and for some people who may not understand that?
Yeah, there's a form of collective home ownership. It's between owning your own home and renting, I suppose, is the simple way of seeing it. So you have a portion of the overall mortgage. It's a really exciting scheme. It's been piloted by a co-housing scheme in Leeds called Lilac, and they basically peg your monthly payments at 33% of your income. So it could go up and down as your income changes, and you can build your equity up as you go along. So it means if you leave, you don't leave empty-handed. You actually have some equity to either go into get your own home, or for a deposit for rent. So it's a really exciting model, but it does need it is in pilot phase at Lilac, so it does need simplifying. So we have a researcher at the moment. We have something called the Community-Led Housing Growth Lab, and one of which WeCanMake were on the first round of, which was brilliant. And we've got a researcher at the moment looking at how do you simplify it. So if anybody's specifically interested in that, then they're welcome to email me, and I'll link them up with our researcher. And if they can, they're looking for people who are looking at making that decision, looking for home ownership solutions like mutual home ownership or cooperatives. She really wants to kind of get inside the kind of decision-making process. So that's something we're hoping to be able to release something on next year.
Well, we'll follow that with interest. So I know we're in terms of looking at the diversity of different types of provision, both in terms of looking at affordable housing provision in particular. That sounds really exciting. But I think there are a couple of final questions, and we've still got a little bit of time for that. For those, there's one from Caroline, and Caroline has written extensively on housing for older people and looking internationally at different models. So she's said really interesting presentation. But Claire, can you just explain a little bit more about Block Build?
Oh yeah, of course. So Block Build, they are so it's a cassette-based system ultimately. So it's all cut on a CNC machine in our factory. Everything is kind of safely handled by 2 people, so it makes it a very easy kind of construction process without having to use big cranes. And yeah, as I said, it can involve local people. It was set up by a group in Hull, and they now it's based on like a license system, so we can manufacture it here using their license, and it's BOPAS accredited.
And there's probably a bit more of a technical question from our friends in Scotland about what the dimension between the cross walls. About maybe if you do know off the top of your head, fine. But if not, please do let us know or put it in the chat or liaise directly.
So the dimensions between what? Sorry.
The cross walls.
Sorry. On the back garden sites, or maybe they can follow up with me afterwards. I'm happy to.
I'm not quite sure in particular what they're referring to there. And finally, back to Jim actually, and Jim actually probably doesn't live far away from where you are, Claire, so maybe also a visit at some point. What could Bristol and other councils do to better support the infill model created in Old West?
It's a very good question, because we're still trying to win some of those battles, but there is actually a lot more support on the national level for these rear garden sites. So I think once it starts to come through more at that level, and then councils adopting it, I think that will help. And part of it is setting precedent, but I think as we get more sites and that precedent is set a bit, that we have more evidence, I think that will hopefully help. But ultimately, it does take a planning consultant to be willing to try something a bit different.
Yeah, and from the HousingLIN perspective, we've seen some really innovations around providing small clusters of supported living, for example. We've seen some sort of container developments by some local parties. We've seen in the Midlands some retrofitting and as part of a broader regeneration. I think we've had Agile Homes talk with us previous happy hour, and I know that Guy is with us from building accessible homes. Again, thinking about that in relation to a broader accessibility standard as well. So I think there's plenty of scope for innovation and development here. But I'm going to draw this to a close and say thank ever so much for you three for a really fascinating set of presentations. And I know when we were planning this, we thought, I wonder how this will pan out in the end. Well, I hope you all three agree this actually worked out very nicely. And there's been a sort of a really common ground between all of us as we've sort of shared different national, local and regional perspectives. So I wanted just to thank you three for your excellent presentations, to wish Wendy well. I know she couldn't join us. It's amazing that we've managed to reach 108 happy hours in this current series, where, as I said earlier, we're currently working on our next program, which actually will take place after probably Easter. Now, no, we haven't even got to Christmas yet. Now, you may wonder why, and that's partly because we're planning our 2 in-person events, one in Leeds in early March and one in London towards the end of March. So do watch out in the early new year for details about how you can register to attend our free in-person conferences. It would be a big first for us. Well, Sally, first of all, wasn't with us when we held our last in-person event 5 years ago. So this is a big sort of thing for us, but it's also great for us to get back into sort of real-life networking and presentation. So without further ado, just to wish you all thanks again for your participation, wishing you festive greetings, and thanks to the team behind the scenes who've managed to get through 12 happy hours this series with not too many problems at all. So thanks very much, and look forward to seeing you in 2025. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.